All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Kyle Lanzalone Show. And I have a great one scheduled for everyone today. This is going to be my first time interviewing my guest today, but I am very excited to talk to her. This is somebody who I have read for years and years and years. And really, her understanding of the Department of Defense helped to shape my understanding of the military industrial complex and just what role the Pentagon plays in that. So, introducing Karen Kwiatkowski, a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. She's a fellow at the Eisenhower Media Network and an associate scholar at the Mises Institute. She also writes at LouRockwell.com and KarenKwiatkowski.substack.com. Karen, welcome to the show today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be your guest today.
Well, very happy to have you here. As I was mentioning to you before the episode, I'm sure a lot of my guests, our audience, probably recognize you from your weekly appearances on Judging Freedom with Judge Andrew Napolitano, where you give some really excellent insights into the U.S. war state and what we have going on in the world today. So I'm very excited to bring some of that analysis to my show. Now, one thing I want to ask you about and start off here. From May of 2002 to February of 2003, you served in the Pentagon's Near East and South Asia Directorate. And so this is, from what I remember, the run-up to the Iraq War, right? This is the Pentagon during that time. And you wrote a series of anonymous articles, insider notes from the Pentagon. And, I think that may be really important to look back on and talk about just for a few minutes today, because we could be in the potential run up to another major war in the Middle East. We have 2 aircraft carrier strike groups in the region, a fleet of B-2 bombers, bases littered all over with tens of thousands of American soldiers, deploying more military access to the region over the time, talks of potential war with Iran or even a ground invasion of Yemen. And so, Karen, I just want to get your thoughts on what was the Pentagon like at that time, and what should we watch out for if we really are building up to another major Middle East conflict today?
Yeah, well, it was an exciting time in the Pentagon where I worked at the Office of Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary for Plans, Near East South Asia. Okay, so that is where both Iraq and Iran desks were, along with much of the Middle East and North Africa. So, and they were excited. They were very excited in 2000, well, since 9/11, extremely excited, because as we all remember, they tried to lay 9/11 on Saddam Hussein's doorstep. That was, surely he did that. And, we have Rumsfeld, saying, dig up everything you can find. It must have been Saddam. We've got to link him somehow. And of course they couldn't, and they didn't, because Saddam, being a Ba'ath socialist and under threat by Al-Qaeda forces in his own country, definitely had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. And of course, so this was and people inside the Pentagon understood this, intelligence people understood this very well, but the politicians who drive these wars wanted to juice up the story and to justify and to get people excited and to identify the enemy after 9/11. Now they couldn't lay it on Iraq right away, but they spent the whole summer after that, the spring and summer of 2002, trying to make the national case here at home and I guess to some extent Western Europe, that we needed to go in and do this, take out Saddam Hussein. So it was a story they made up. They wanted it. They wanted to believe it. They wanted all of us to believe it. And they worked the system. They created the propaganda. They falsified evidence. They used the intelligence system to make it look like there was more support for the theories that they had or the story they were telling than really existed. And of course, we're right in the middle of all this. And I'll just, there's so many things about that we could talk all day and all night about it. But one thing that I'll tell you, and I think I mentioned this in stuff I've written before, but I had a buddy in the Navy, and I believe he was either a commander or a captain, and I hadn't seen him in about 8 months. I hadn't seen him since the summer of I hadn't seen him since the spring of 2002, and I ran into him just before Christmas in the hallway. Pentagon has hallways. I happened to see him and say, "Hey, where you been? I hadn't seen you in 8 months." I said, "What have you been doing?" And he says, I've been working day and night and day. We're sending the ships and the logistics and the arms and the weapons over to invade Iraq. And I said, how could you possibly have been working that for 8 months when we only just, I mean, the whole thing is it actually, it wasn't right before. It was, we hadn't had a lot of time to really convince the American people. In fact, there was still much debate in December. But he said, oh yeah. I said, how do you do this? How are you doing this? He goes, well, the decision was made a long time ago to invade Iraq. And our job in the Navy, in Navy logistics and for Navy weapon systems, is to prepare for decisions that have been made. And that's what we were doing. He said, basically 7 days a week. He said he was exhausted and he couldn't wait to get out. That is how they operate. So, we didn't see that story from Judith Miller, right? Judith Miller, right. The pimping the population to think that there's this great danger of all kinds of things that weren't real. But in fact, a war was wanted, and we can look back today and we could see it then too, that this war was a war for Israel. It was a war that Israel really had wanted for a long time and was demanding. And when Israel demands, Washington bends the knee. It did that, over 20 years ago. Did it in 1967 with the Liberty. We bend the knee, and Americans don't like to think we do that, but we do. And this war was planned. It was approved. It was put into logistical play long before the American people had the slightest clue that we were going to war. And also then that the debate was there, that this really wasn't even, that we were being lied to, that the American people were being lied to. And none of that matters. Right? Because once you get your war, it doesn't matter how you lied. I mean, we see this all the time. I mean, Ukraine, right? The New York Times has created a new story, a backstory about Ukraine. Is it true? No, not really. I mean, not unless they own up to their role in selling this war and supporting it, but they're not going to do that. After the fact, we are free to discuss, right? But before the war, the Pentagon will take care of it. And that's what they did then.
Right. So, in your answer there, you say something that I think is really interesting, where you say it was an exciting time in the Pentagon. Now, they're about to kick off a war that's going to last decades, that's going to result in hundreds, if not a million dead Iraqis. And maybe most importantly, for the Pentagon, over 5,000 dead American soldiers. Now, I'm sure they probably don't go in thinking they're going to lose thousands of Americans, but certainly fighting a major war in Iraq, they had to know was going to be dangerous. And so I guess my question is, was there people in the Pentagon like you who were dissenting, or does everybody just get caught up in like the excitement and I guess the collective thinking of, oh, we have to do something and that this is going to be some great victory for America?
Yeah, that's a good question. What it seems to me, and I was not the only one who observed the disconnects, and saw some of the stuff that was going on that didn't make any sense. I had a couple of friends working in the office where I worked, a Navy and an Army guy. I think one was in 2005, one was in 2006. And they actually informed me of things that confirmed what I was suspecting was happening, that the lies were really being made up. The intelligence was being juiced, and creatively put together, and then bypassing normal channels, getting it right to the decision makers, that kind of thing, to sell a story, to sell a war. They knew that, and they knew other things as well. That they help. We talk about these things in the office, but their solution was to call their assignments officers. But the Navy has their assignment, the Army. They called their guys and they said, "Get me out of here." They both got out of there, and they got out of there before they got out of there by the fall of 2002. Now, they might have gone to units that were participating in the war, but what they couldn't tolerate was working in an atmosphere of such politicized lying and such warmongering, all of which they understood as people really more battle hardened than I ever would be or was. They understood the politicization and the demand for war that was coming from civilians, that was coming from politicians, that was coming from Israelis, that was coming from, of course, the neocons that were advising both the people in the Congress, the president, the Pentagon, the State Department, I hate to use the word infested because it has a bad connotation, but really it was infested with neoconservatives. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with a philosophy, an ideology, neoconservatism. There's nothing wrong with that ideology in an academic sense. You can make your case, you can view things through that lens, you can put things together, that's fine. Okay. But when you're consistently wrong, okay, and you have yet still retained an air of legitimacy, an air of authority, an air of, you know, pride or respect that, you know, oh, you're real smart. You're going to tell us to go do this thing. We're going to do that because you're real smart. No, that was horrendous. And we are having, you know, the same kind of thing must be happening today. I don't know. What I do know is only like from reading people's signal chats, right? At the Pentagon.
Well,
I can
I
look
did
at
want
what
to
they're
ask you
saying.
about that because
Yeah.
when you say exciting, that seems like on that chat that many of them were excited. Even somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who you would think would be a little bit more reserved on the issue,
Yeah.
you know, they're all celebrating the attack after it happens. And so, were
Yeah.
you surprised by the decorum in that signal chat, or from your time working in the Pentagon during this era, where is this just like the war hype that you're used to?
There's war hype, and you know, I think with every war there's a war hype, but some of the excitement from the people I worked in 20 something years ago is the excitement of having something to do. I mean, think about, you know, I'm not going to throw Doge a bone here, but I really am, because most time your job in the Pentagon is extremely boring and you're not doing anything. And most of the guys in the Pentagon are punching a ticket. Most of the military guys anyway are punching a ticket there in order to get that ticket punched and go back into the so-called real world of warfighting or whatever it is that they do for the military. So this was exciting in the sense of what people like to perceive they're trained to do in the military. So there's that. And there's also, when something is happening, the pace accelerates. And many people in the Pentagon are looking for, military people are looking for not just punching the ticket of service for the OSD or the you know, the command staff or something. They're looking to excel. They're looking to achieve something. And so when they're being asked to do a lot of things, you can achieve, you can get a good report, you can get a great plum assignment after this. I mean, it's exciting on a personal level. Of course, on a national level, on an ideological level, on a moral level, it's not exciting. It's extremely, it's extremely not just frightening, but sad and disgusting in a way. You know, it's like the worst part of people comes out in this excitement of preparing for a conflict. It is like a game, like a football game or any hockey game, anything where you're cheering for one side and you're hoping the other side gets obliterated. There is an excitement there, right? The bread and circuses. It's about getting people to feel this way, and people in the Pentagon, of course, feel that way. But it is a little surprising. But maybe it's just my generation when I see the kind of tone of the signal conversation, the chat before and after, you know, the choice of emojis and things like that. It really tells me we don't have anybody using their brain, really. Their cognitive skills. We're not looking at anybody questioning anybody who's on that signal chat. And again, we should have expected Tulsi to do better. And Vance did exhibit a little bit of what made him, I think, popular amongst anti-war folks, or at least what I thought was good about him. But he gave in so easily. And that is very much a juvenile trait, you know, go along with the crowd. We're supposed to grow out of that, you know, after high school, after middle school. We're supposed to grow out of that. We're supposed to start thinking and standing on our own 2 feet and calling a spade if that's what we need to do. And they didn't do any of that. So it's a blessing in a way that we got to see how it is they view this, because when Americans start to directly, not like we're doing in Gaza, which is in a sense indirectly, but when we directly start blowing up bodies and killing a bunch of people, and our guys start coming back, our guys and gals start coming back injured and wounded in bags, then we can remember how juvenile they were in thinking that this was a game. And it's not a game. And it's also not authorized by Congress, by the way. I mean, they don't have any war. that they haven't even asked for. Trump hasn't even asked for this. So, and Trump is at fault too. But Trump, I don't, somebody who's been in the military, Vance has been a Marine, okay? Hedge spent time in the military. Some of these guys, Tulsi has been in the military, and they know better, okay? They know better, but they're not reflecting on their important roles in making our policy. So this is a dangerous time, but we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that Trump is watching this as entertainment and it will pull back from the abyss. There's a reason we've never attacked Iran, despite Israel wanting us to do that for ages. And we've never even considered seriously going onto the ground in Iran. There's a reason for that, because the geography and the people and the culture and the distance from our logistical hubs, it's not workable. I mean, think about how we left Afghanistan.
Right.
The way we left, and it's not, I'm not picking on Biden. At some point we would have had to leave, and it would have been ugly. There's this idea that, oh, we can tear this place up and develop enemies everywhere and waste all this money and do all this kind of terrible thing, and then we're going to leave. It's going to be smooth and easy, and everybody's going to say, thanks a lot, had a great time. No, they're not going to say that. They're going to try to kill you as you leave. We didn't even do that very well, and that was a tiny operation compared to what you might need to subdue Iran in a military sense. And hopefully that's not what Trump's looking to do. Hopefully Trump's looking to subdue or to encourage Iran in a certain direction without the use of force.
Yeah.
I do not know.
So one of the, statements there you used a few times to describe the Trump administration, which unfortunately I think is very accurate, is juvenile. And we had this post from Trump on his True Social account, and I don't think we can actually show the video because it's showing the murder of several people. But he posted this video of Yemen, and he says that these 40 or 50 people all stood in a circle outside, and this was a gathering of Houthis as they prepared to attack the US, and we dropped an airstrike on them and we killed a lot of them. And just from my thinking of it, Karen, I know that the Houthis have been fighting and on the receiving end of multiple air wars over essentially the entire past decade. So I highly doubt that the Houthis have 40 or 50 of their fighters meet outdoors under the open skies where a drone could attack them at any point in time. Yeah. And then we had some reporting later on, including from my colleague at antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp wrote an article. Yemeni media says Trump shared footage of U.S. strike on a religious gathering. And so this, I think, really just shows the immaturity of the Trump administration, where not only are they, sharing emojis about this conflict and using just Israeli intelligence to pick all these targets in Yemen, but also even when they commit war crimes, they're celebrating and sharing them. It's kind of baffling and very disgusting.
It is. And, the American people and of the global society as a whole, we are not the same as we were in 2001 and 2 and 3. Social media has changed and adapted. We have so much more access to actual intelligence, sometimes better than what is processed up through the various, chimneys or silos, in the military intelligence system. So this when they behave in juvenile manner, when they say things that are not true, like this Donald Trump post or Truth Social is not factual. Okay, they weren't it's almost humorous that it's so idiotic that he would say this. But the thing is, what happens is American people aren't as idiotic as we used to be. So we're all talking about this like 2 days later or 1 day later. I think it was probably noticed immediately how silly that this picture is and what he's saying. And then you have to really worry about what is being provided to our decision makers. Has intelligence gotten better in 20, 23 or 24 years? Looking at that post, I would have to say, no, it has not gotten any better. They are feeding the politicians what the politicians want. The politicians are like Dick Cheney. He was criticized going to the CIA, going into the Pentagon, telling them this is what I want you to produce for me. No, not that, this one. If you're not going to do that, I'm going to find somebody who does. And he said he was creating what he needed to make his point, to sell his war. to sell his construct for Iraq. And we said that was bad. We said, yeah, he shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't interfere with the production of intelligence. We want actual information. But when I see a picture like that, and then the way it's labeled, then I think, well, actually, it looks like they are cherry picking intelligence. People in the intelligence community are saying, oh, he'll probably like this one. Look, it might be Houthis praying, and it might also be Houthis preparing for an attack. Why don't we give him both options and see which one he puts on Truth Social? This is not how you run a great country. Okay, it's not how you run any type of war. We are doomed. I hope that there's no war, but if this is how they're going to run a war, we're going to lose it. Might as well say right now, this is going to be a major loss. And actually, many of our wars, in fact, every one in my lifetime has been a loss. Okay, but this maybe will be a quicker loss, a more obvious loss. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, but it seems like they're not thinking.
Yeah. So, Karen, I want to ask you about one of the recent articles you published at LouRockwell.com. This one titled, After Ukraine and NATO Are Spun Off, Who's Next? And you get into the recent New York Times expose on Ukraine, and you point out something I think is really important that a lot of people who have broke down this article haven't gotten into. And you write that it revealed Western contempt for the Western army, as well as a sense of Western sense of superiority vis-a-vis the Ukrainians. And the former Zelensky advisor, Alinsky Oskinov, said European and American elites see Ukrainians as monkeys with grenades. Mm-hmm. And I think this is just so important. And as you talk about there, this, juvenile and immature thinking, well, I guess this was pervasive during the Biden administration too. And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on how that kind of thinking has really led us down a unsustainable path in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, the juvenile thinking, but also typical colonial type thinking systems. I mean, we or the people that are leading our country view us as on top, us as the smartest, and us as having the most intelligence via our apparatus around the world. So we think we're top dog, directing everything. We know everything. The fact is, and it's arrogant, okay? It's first off, it's a false idea that we know everything, because certainly we don't. But it's also an arrogant idea, and it is something we can laugh about, because who doesn't want to be on the winning team, right? Who does not want to be on the winning team? We all want to be, glad handing each other, and we're the winners, and we've got the best team. But the rest of the world sees this very differently, and they see it much of the world sees it in a colonial context. They see it as, you come over here, you treat us like dirt. You really don't think we're equal to you. And then we're easy to sacrifice, and you're willing to sacrifice us. And certainly the Ukrainian story is a story where, there was no number of Ukrainians that didn't have to die as long as some Russians died too. I mean, our own senators that are very aged, I forget the guy from Kentucky and South Carolina, both of them celebrate the death of Ukrainians. And that's very immature. That's very gang-like, very, we're the big guys on the block. And the thing is, if you are top dog, if you are the winners, you usually don't have to talk about it that much. But if you do, at least it's backed up by reality. But our country, the United States, we haven't won a thing since World War II, and we didn't do that by ourselves, contrary to popular opinion. So since then, we've won nothing. We spent tons of money, created huge disasters around the world, haven't fixed them. We're not winners in the eyes of the rest of the world. We are simply arrogant bullies. And the way when we talk and joke about war, when we see, Hegseth, texting emojis of things blowing up, or, we showed them, this is not good for our country. We should be ashamed of it. And I think Trump himself should be very ashamed of it, but he's not. He's actually it's part of his shtick, I guess. It's part of his connection to the people. I'm one of you guys. I'm a American. I like to laugh. Well, the rest of the world's not laughing. Okay. They're not laughing. They don't like it. They don't respect us. And they shouldn't in many ways. What have we done to be respected by them? So it's a it's a problem. But and again, we talk about Ukrainians, but look at Gazans, right? I mean, the Gazans clearly, in the eyes of most Israelis, have no rights and do not deserve to live. They are, many of their elected leaders advocate the murder of babies, pregnant women, men, children, boys, whatever. They just want to kill them, much as you would if you had mice in your house, you would want them gone. And that's how they view it. And we're not allowed to talk about that. You know, we can't talk about that here in this country. But we can talk about Ukrainians and the idea that Americans view them as monkeys with grenades. We're still allowed to talk about that. And what does that tell us about? What does it tell us about us? It's concerning. This country should not be engaging in any war right now, not a single one. We should be completely closing down the operations of war, bringing all the bases home, troops home, and do a reset until we figure out what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. Because it looks like we do have children, toddlers, running our policy, running and with their fingers on effectively the nuclear button too.
Yeah. So you described there, and I think a very disturbing but accurate description of saying the Israelis treat the Palestinians like mice in their homes, essentially, you know, rodents to be exterminated. And I want to mention this other article that you have written that I thought had just such an important insight. The title of the article is AIPAC getting what they wanted in DC? And you write, pro-Israeli lobbies and organizations got what they paid for it in 2024. Hundreds of millions of dollars of pro-Zionist donations to the Trump campaign and Trump-aligned PACs helped to let Trump and every important appointment, and some less ones are vocal Israeli firsters. And you just go on to point out that avid Zionists lead the State Department, the Pentagon, the Director of National Intelligence. And so, you know, we have this dynamic here where there's a country where the subservient population, the Palestinians, have been completely dehumanized, in the part of the population, the Israelis, the Jews, that have all the power. They have a complete monopoly on violence. And the world's strongest country, the largest military in the world, has given a complete blank check to the Israelis. I mean, this is really disturbing. And I guess, how far do you think this goes down the road of not only eroding our rights here at home, the First Amendment, but potentially the American participation in the worst genocide, you know, in our lifetimes?
Yeah. Well, first off, we're already participating in the worst genocide of our lifetime. We have funded it. We have protected it in the UN. We have advocated for Israel doing what it's doing. We've given them top cover, middle cover, cash, weapons, and the weapons we give them, and even the F-35s that we build and F-16s that we sell them, are all participating in this genocide. That's what we're doing. And we are already guilty. Okay, so the one question is going to have to be, how do we deal with this as a country? Because it's a pretty big thing to have already committed to, and none of it was done with any real national conversation. None of it was done with any declaration of war in the Congress. And of course, had Congress actually discussed it, AIPAC has minders for everyone except Thomas Massey. So, you know, they're all afraid to buck their funders. They don't want to have primary challengers, things like that. So I think the good part of it, if there is a good part, is that this is now common knowledge. What we're talking about is really common knowledge. The protests at the universities, that's one thing. Universities always have protests, and that's fine. They should many times think good things start there. But what we are finding is a whole bunch of Trump voters. Now, first off, Trump got the majority of the votes. And that's a party associated with evangelical Christian Zionism in many ways, and associated with pro-Israel, right? That's the Republicans. But his voters, many of them are in social media and elsewhere, are pulling away from what Trump is doing. They're saying we elected him to stop wars, and all he's done is send weapons over to the Middle East. And then they say, well, why is he doing that? Oh, I don't know. Well, because Netanyahu asked him to, because Marion Adelson asked him to. Steve Witkoff is, you know, doing this stuff for him. The various people that put Israel before America in this country that Trump has appointed and the Congress has confirmed, these folks. So now there's a separation between Trump's voters and the kind of government that Trump is now running. So that we didn't, I don't think we had that kind of sense in 1967 when the Liberty was shot out of the water. Most people grew up their whole lives, never heard of the Liberty. But now I would say 20 to 25, 30% of the population has heard of the USS Liberty, and they understand what happened. Of course, it's ancient history. But now it's like people are getting it. And the other thing that's interesting is our economy is contracting for a number of reasons. It's not what it was. You can't turn that around in a minute. And so people, when they feel poor, which our people in this country have felt poorer and poorer for many years, this downward trend in quality of life and the sense of progress that we're having economically. One of the things that we do is we start to resent giving away our tax dollars to foreign countries. And Israel, of course, the largest recipient for years, without question. And what are they doing? Oh, I don't know. They're talking our candidate that we elected president because he was going to keep us out of the wars and bring the troops home. This is why we elected him. And now what's happening is, oh my God, we're giving all this money to Israel and they're talking him into more wars. Well, I don't know if it's just them talking him in, but the perception is very broad now. Now, the Democrats are interesting because they should be all over this supporting Gaza. From a political perspective, it seems to me that this should be very important for the Democratic Party. It's consistent with what they say their values are, to help the downtrodden, to not have racism, to fight colonialism, that kind of thing. But they're being very silent. But I think the independents in this country, some Republicans and some Democrats, and of course libertarians and others, are starting to share a concept that what we are doing and our relationship with Israel, our political relationship with Israel, needs to be downshifted big time, and it better be downshifted quick. I think people are feeling that. That is new and different, I think, now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It does seem that there's more and more momentum in that direction. And Karen, I would love to keep you for longer. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I'll have to have you back on the show sometime soon.
I always talk too much.
No, it was fantastic, and the audience loved it. This is one of the bigger audiences that we've had live on the show. So if anybody is listening live, be sure that you like, subscribe, share it out there, particularly on the YouTube channel, so that you can leave us a comment. And of course, we will be back here with another episode of the Kyle Lanzalone Show Wednesday at 4:45 with Dave DeCamp. And don't forget to check out Karen and read her weekly articles at LouRockwell.com and her appearances on Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Karen.